interesting live viewership over the past few weeks. It's been very good. Today, we are joined again at WorldView, the number one media company where we explore everybody's views on things that could explode or expand, increase, enrich our own worldview. Today, we're having as a guest together with Sebo Matseba, our co-host, we have Mr. Dumo Denga, political analyst. Hello, Dumo. Can I call you Dumo, or do you prefer that I call you Mr. Denga?
Oh, you can say Mr. Denga or Dumo. It doesn't make a difference. Thank you for having me on.
I'll call you Mr. Denga.
Mr. Denga, okay, cool.
Yeah, if you can, but you can call me Solly.
Oh, okay, no problem, Solly. Okay. I will call you Solly then.
Thank you very much. We're also expecting two other guests for Mr. There you go, Kganki Matabane. Mr. Matabane, hello, good evening and welcome.
Thanks, and how are you? And how's Sebo and Dumo?
The last time we spoke was there at the Brand Summit in Cape Town in 2018. Looks like your hair has gone grayer than mine.
Are you sure you're not using the dye or something?
I do. I use lots of dye because my hair gets as white as the shirt you're wearing. It gets really hectic, you know. So I say to myself, there are men who lose their hair like Sebo. I don't lose mine, so I can play with it.
Yeah, I've got options.
Yeah. Okay. So we have one other guest who's meant to join us, but we're not going to wait for him because he'll join when he joins us. The discussion tonight is about BEE, and given everything that has happened to South Africa, the economy where it's at now, and of course BEE is sectoral, right? We had a very interesting discussion this morning with people from the tourism industry about the extent to which they feel there's been transformation in the tourism industry. Do we, gentlemen, do you think that the conversation that we should be having about BEE today is similar to the one that we would have had 10 years ago? Or is this something that should be said, done differently? Matabane, you want to start first, and then we go to Mr. Dumo. Denga.
Yeah, I think we should have a different discussion because we have a legislation. We now have what is called Code of Good Practice. What we should be doing is to check progress on implementation, so that if the implementation is not done properly, we can then improve implementation. And if there are instances where we need to look at the legislation itself and see if we need to amend it, we can do that. So we can't have the same discussion that we had 10 years ago. It means we're basically not going anywhere if that is the type of discussion we're having.
Okay, Mr. Denga?
Yeah, I think when it comes to BEE, I'm just going to lay my position on it and then talk about the discussions, right? So my position on BEE is that this should be done voluntarily on a company level. I don't think the state should be getting involved in telling people who they should hire. I think if there's a company that's black owned and they only want black people there and they say no whites allowed, fine, I'm not going to stop them. It's their company. The same thing with a white company or whatever. I think that's my position. Everything must be voluntary. I think when the state gets involved, I just feel that the wrong incentives are created. And we even saw at the state capture report, they even said the problem why state capture was really a problem was because of BEE. There was so much ambiguity around it that people exploited it, right? Or the government exploited it. And then that probably goes back to what Kganki said, when maybe we have to look at the legislation and see how it works. But my position is that there shouldn't be any BEE legislation, but companies should be allowed or encouraged to do it. And so I think not by the state though, not by the state, right? But if they decide that, look, we want to, they can even say, we are company X, blacks only. They can say that. I won't have a problem with that, right? And I think, to be honest, there are companies that are proudly black, and we see it today, without having any interference from the state, right? But we all know what BEE does, people front and everything like that. They'll put, like you've seen with companies that are owned by quote unquote white people, and then they'll put like the gardeners and the domestic workers, the directors as fronting and stuff. doesn't create the right incentives. But then with regards to the conversation, I think the conversation we should have is really, should the state get involved in determining who should be hired? That's the first question. And the second one is that if the answer to that question is yes, then the next one would be like, how so? And maybe the incentives could play a role. And one last point, I had Jimmy Ramachop on my show, I think 2 years ago, and he was of the idea that we should have BEE, but it should be incentivized rather than legislated. That's what he felt. I disagreed, but that conversation was hectic. But anyway, that's my position. Thanks.
Okay. Simple.
It's a fascinating discussion, isn't it? I think one of the key issues I'm interested for us to unpack, and maybe can help us in terms of the state of BEE today. We know the views of all of us have different views of our own, but perhaps we can talk about the state of BEE today. And we know that there's a discussion about relevance, but if we can just talk about where are we today, we know to an extent what are some of the obvious failures of the system, but has it worked, and where are we today? We know we have codes, etc. But has it worked? Is it about ownership, or is it about placing people at the right places for the wrong reasons? What is the state of the nation in terms of BEE today?
But don't you think we made a mistake in the beginning by not having clear performance indicators for BEE, or even key milestones from the start? You know, at what point, maybe after every 5 years or 10 years, we're going to look at a certain number of things to see the extent to which it's working and it's making the changes that we want. But also, it's really painful to have a conversation about BEE without talking about state capture and other forms of corruption, because they have impacted massively. They have almost slowed South Africa down a lot. A lot of the money that had been in the system, that was supposed to be in the system, had been shifted to places where it shouldn't go. Money that could have been held to maybe fund small businesses, especially small Black businesses, you know, create skills here and create opportunities, a better enabling environment for people to start their own stuff, instead of, so that we move from a point of I like to call it expropriatory Black economic development to developmental Black economic development. So people, where we start new things, we create opportunities for Black people because they have what it takes. I mean, they're just like other human beings, if you given the environment, to do amazing things. But now we want to treat them as babies. We want to wait for white people to start things, and you take 50% or 20%, give business to Black people. I mean, that's nonsense, really. I also
you raise an important point, Suli, about authentic empowerment, what it's really supposed to be. And unfortunately, things that don't happen as we anticipate or as we plan. I don't think we can have a discussion about BEE in isolation without discussing the other issues. But what is the? I just wanted us perhaps to start at where are we now, and maybe that can help us to pick up some key takeouts from our very important guests.
Mr. Matabane is looking at you with a smile. Let's hear what he has to say to this.
I think let me start at the beginning. I think firstly, the comment that we don't need BEE ignores our history, and that will never allow it, because Black people were oppressed through a legislation, and we're talking about broad-based Black economic empowerment. So they were legislated not to play a role in their own economy. So to correct that, you have to do it through a legislation. You can't leave it to what is called the market. The market is still white. They are not going to do it. It's just as simple as that. We've seen it. So that's the first thing. So the issue of saying no, we can't tell people who to hire. We're not telling, government's not telling people who to hire, to say go and hire Tsepo. That's not the issue. but the ownership, management, control of the economy must reflect the demographics of South Africa. That's the end game. So people come and come and say, no, when is BE coming to an end? If they're dragging their feet, it will take forever. But if they make sure that they hire black people, it's not a favor. We're not running a parallel economy where we have a black economy and a white economy. The economy is one in South Africa. When we've got telecoms, we've got two big companies that controls 90%. So you can't tell us and say black people must go and start another telco company. It won't work. We don't run a parallel economy in South Africa. We run only one economy. And that economy belongs to all South Africans. And that economy, the management, the control, and everything else must reflect the demographic. Until we get to that level, we need more legislation to put more screw and bring more stick. Because at the moment, you say BE is not incentivized. It is. If you've read the code of good practice, people do certain things. They appoint the woman there. They appoint the person with disability. They give people. They're not even giving. They're selling people shares, and then they get BE points. But black people still have to pay those loans. So there's no free lunch and giving black people nothing. That's it's not exactly what's happening. So people are getting points, but they're getting points for doing nothing, because people go and try and rig the system and not implement the spirit of BEE. The spirit of black economic empowerment is simple. Make sure that you bring people who were excluded by law into the mainstream economy. And until that time, we'll never have peace. There's no way the BE is going to be repealed. It will be with us until the demographics are reflected. That's the end game. So whoever thinks BE is going to come to an end anytime soon, they're lying.
So you can't. Okay, let's agree that we all agree on the end game of what needs to happen. Let's just assume that.
But that's the
but it hasn't worked.
That is the end game.
Okay, but the thing is, you can't keep trying the same method over and over and over again, and without getting what you want. Surely, at some point, you need to stop and say, okay, maybe this thing is not working. We thought this BE thing would work. It doesn't work. I have a friend of mine who did a PhD recently on BE, especially in the mining sector, and he believes that BE was formed by what he calls the white monopoly capital. They imposed it on Beki, and the ANC took it over as its own. But the BE will never do what people like you in the Black Management Forum think is going to make. And I mean, surely you should be able in 2022 to say these are the achievements of BE, and I'm not sure that you're able to do that.
Yeah, but it's not true. But I'll come to that if I wanted to deal with the state capture, because what you are trying to imply is that black people are corrupt. So no. you are saying state capture was
I didn't say black. I said just state capture, but you're saying black.
Yeah, you're saying it's enabled by BE. No, it's not true. The people who benefited out of state capture is Indian people who are not South African. So we can't bring black people into this. Black people are corrupt like any other race. There's no race that is not corrupt. We've seen it. Bain and Company, we've seen KPMG, we've seen McKinsey and others. Those are not black people. So you can't say no. Because
I need to correct you. What I'm saying, but before you continue, let me just say. No, but you're misreading me. I didn't say anything about black people linked. I said because we had BE state capture and we continue to have other forms of corruption in South Africa, a lot of money that could be going to developing, to helping create an enabling environment for black people to start their own stuff has been stolen by people of all colors, by black people. Zuma was at the top of that list, whether you like it or not. Duduzane Zuma has benefited from that, and a lot of black people benefited from it. So it's Indian people, white people, also people benefited from state capture and other forms of corruption. And that all of that corruption has made it hard for government to invest in projects or policies that would ensure that a better environment is created for people to start businesses and thrive. in stable economic environments.
Yeah. But I just wanted to demystify that myth. That myth is not true.
Okay.
Don't confuse corruption with black people. People who are corrupt must be taken to account, and we've seen a lot of white people who are corrupt, and so we can't mix the two.
But I corrected you. You just keep repeating the same thing. I've just said it's not. I'm not saying what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
going back to the origins of BEE.
Okay.
BEE was originated by the Black Management Forum in Stellenbosch.
Mm-hmm.
They came with an idea that, no, let's form a BEE commission. Then they invited the current president of the country to be the chairman of that commission. And the deputy chairman was the BMF deputy president, Gavin Peterson. And they then invited other black people to come to the table to draft what should be an ideal BEE in South Africa. And Thabo Mbeki was the president by then, and then they want to present this thing to him. But at the end of the day, what was proposed was watered down later. But it's not true that BEE was formed by WMC somewhere. We do have that history.
Mr. Denga, how do you understand the history of BEE?
Well, the way I to be honest, I wouldn't care about the history of it, because I really think that the way it's being implemented, I wouldn't say the way, I just think the idea, right, is a bit ambiguous. Because if you had to say to me, Dumo, do you believe in black economic empowerment? And I'll be like, yeah, I do. And then if you say, do you believe in white economic empowerment? I'll be like, yes, I do, you know? So I think it's what they mean by black economic empowerment. And I have a problem with the means at which they're doing it. And it seems that they're doing it by legislation, because it's based on this vision that all ownership representation has to represent the natural demographic structure of a particular country. But that doesn't sound right, because that can change. I mean, you know, one day, I mean, you could get some radical, you know, white leader who tells his followers that they must reproduce like there's no tomorrow. Then in 20 years in the future, the racial split between black and white people is 50-50. And then what's going to happen now? We're going to say that, well, we must throw BEE out the window because, you know, the racial split is now different. I don't think that's the right way of going about it, because you are basing policy on something that can change very easily over time. And I don't think that's the right way of doing it. I do want black people to be empowered, definitely. And I think that one of the best ways of doing it is by liberating the market. The problem with this country is that the government has made it impossible for people to start businesses. They make market conditions very hostile to new entrants. And then as a result, that favors the incumbents. And then what happens is then the incumbents, they sit with government and then they decide policy, and those policies actually benefit the incumbents, but not necessarily the ones that are trying to get in. And that is something that we need to focus on more. We need more people in the economy. And the nice thing about it is that since the population split is mainly in favor of black people, when I say in favor, I mean the population is like over 70% black people. Chances are, if you free up the market, most likely black people are going to benefit from it anyway. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that we need to be realistic, guys. You know, I remember, see, this is not even me. Kganki said this. When it comes to the economy, right, you don't just beat it and then it goes. It doesn't work like that. You have to create an environment for growth, right? So the whole idea is that you need to you need to create an atmosphere for growth in the economy. And I think that way you'll see more black people benefiting. And remember what I said at the beginning. I said in this scenario, black-owned companies can hire whoever they want. And if they only want to hire black people or they only want black ownership, go ahead. They should be allowed to do that. But we can't think that now the state must be the one that drives this. And look, don't get me wrong, I'm not denying the past, right? Yes, black people were sidelined out of the economy. That is true. Number two, black people were actually, oppressed for a long period of time. That is also true. But we cannot use those same methods in trying to rectify. And also another thing is that we must be very careful with the fact that we must not think that because the demographic representation within ownership in South Africa is not where we want, it doesn't mean that we must make it that way. Because when you make it that way, you're going to create the wrong incentives. Hence the fronting and stuff like that, which then black people are then used as props just to get government contracts, as opposed to hiring, as opposed to the market producing people.
Right,
so remember, and sorry, my mind's all over the place. But also, if you look at the unskilled labor in this country as well, right? It's mainly black people, but the government has priced them out of the market by means of implementing a minimum wage, which favors the unions. Mm-hmm. So even in that sense, we have so many policies that are so anti-black, right? That it makes it difficult for black people to take advantage, and therefore they have to be reliant on a social grant. And one last thing, and this is said by Milton Friedman. He's a Chicago school economist. He's a rival because I'm an Austrian school. I believe in the Austrian school. But he as a white person said that the most anti-black law that we have in our books today in the United States, and this is you're talking about America, is the minimum wage. So I think if we want to have BEE, as in more black people participating in the economy, starting companies and becoming wealthier, let's set up a conditions for that. The state does not have to get involved. And in fact, the state will save a lot of money. In fact, and then they can focus on other things. Why should they get involved so heavily?
Yeah, that's a good point. Tebo?
Yeah, sorry. The fascinating aspect is that you often hear, I think it was Bill Johnson in the US. He was the 44th president. He was saying that you don't take people who for years were hobbled by chains, unchain them, put them at the starting line of the race and say you are now free to compete with all the others who had an opportunity for fitness and for training. And maybe there's a question around, is it that whenever you address the injustices of the past, here we're talking about economically so, if you address the injustices of the past, that isn't there an opportunity not to say that therefore addressing them based on the reality and using policy instruments, because apartheid was a policy instrument. So now you're using a policy instrument to coerce and to drive things in a particular direction. That whenever you have that discussion, it doesn't mean that you are saying that white people don't matter. By the way, you are simply addressing the impact of a system that happened in the past, and that was orchestrated through legislation.
So reverse apartheid is what we need, really, to correct the wrongs of the past.
No, that's the problem that I'm asking. I'm putting to the table. That isn't there an opportunity not to whenever you deal with a transformation, not to mix it up with incompetence or mix it up with reverse.
Well, it has been, some of those things have been mixed over time. I mean, just to the point of Mr. Denga earlier. Look, there are many people, especially in the hospitality sector, restaurants. My home is in Cape Town. I know a number of people who own restaurants who would rather hire Zimbabweans, for instance, for the point that you made about people being priced out of the market, the poorest of the poor being priced out of the market. People, if I start a restaurant, when you all start a business, one of the big things you look at are costs of running the business, and labor inputs are also part of those. It doesn't mean that we should encourage a situation where people are exploited, but it also doesn't mean that we should take away the option from people who are studying up to say, look, I can only afford to pay so much on labor and not so much. Otherwise, you say then basically the current system says you either start a business and you must be able to afford so much for your employees, or you don't start a business. But maybe you should allow people to start somewhere so that over time they grow, and when people perform, they can be incentivized with better pay over time. I don't know. It has to start somewhere, but where is somewhere? I think we also have to agree really on some kind of sunset clauses. For it can't last forever. What we're not looking at is that there's a young, say, it's a white South African who was born, obviously, in South Africa, say 15 years ago, way after the end of apartheid. Now that person comes in front of an opportunity. So maybe they start a company, but they can't get business from government because they don't have a black partner. Okay. Or they can't get a job because there's a black person next to them with the same qualification who must get it because of apartheid. So we're actually driving white South Africans out of the country. We are doing that. It's a racist. Either way you look at it, it's racist.
That's the risk we are running here with the debate, because now we're
not looking at the impact of young whites who are growing up saying, but there's no room for me in this country. I'd rather go somewhere else.
I love this conversation because you and I are entrepreneurs. So, but if you take in the context, let's move it slightly as an example, and I'm not changing the debate towards the discussion about gender empowerment, bringing more females into the boardroom. You have the Tsepo and Soli with the same qualifications, and next to us comes Duduzile with the same qualifications. Is it now gender apartheid to give Duduzile an opportunity? Maybe not. Maybe the best candidate should win, but maybe there should be a deliberate plan to redress the gender imbalances.
But for how long?
And that it can't be called this and things like that. But maybe let's hear from Kganki.
Okay.
and then Dumo, I see your hand.
Yeah, maybe just a few points. Firstly, we can't compare South Africa and America. So the fact that an American said something doesn't make it correct. In South Africa, we're trying to empower the majority. And in America, they were trying to empower the minority. So it's completely different. The South Africans, because the majority are disempowered, like we've seen it in July last year. If the majority decides to render the country ungovernable, they will do it. So we can't bring foreign concepts and think they will work here. They won't. Those were based on a certain context. We need to have South African solutions to South African problems. The example of that Tsepo is doing. We have to be deliberate to make sure that all, as I said, the objective is that the ownership and management must reflect the demographics, including women. So women are underrepresented now as we speak. So they have to be brought they must be brought onto the table and being empowered. So that is going to happen. The issue of sunset clause is out of discussion. The sunset clause that you must think of is when the economy reflects the demographics. That would be the sunset clause. So if people are delaying it, they're not implementing it as they're supposed to do, it will be with us until that sunset clause happens. So you just delaying the inevitable.
But B is racially exclusive.
No, but you are forgetting the history. We have to correct what happened.
So by reversing it, but you don't want to call it that. It's difficult to call it reverse. You want to reverse.
The fact that the white child was born 15 years ago, it doesn't mean that the white privilege that they accumulated through apartheid is not there.
So you're making the assumption that every white child is born in a cushion that can take care of them. You're assuming that there are no poor whites who are struggling. I have a daughter. She's 18 years old. Her best friend is a white child. They're in South Africa studying. And the white child doesn't come from a wealthy family. I can tell you that for sure. I've known their family since my child was young. So this young child, who's a friend of my daughter, who is white, blonde, South African, can't get the opportunities because of what happened in the past. That's nonsense, really. Come on. Yeah, you're looking at the person who's saying you white there for people who look like you, did certain things. People who look like you today must pay for those things. That's what you're saying. But
you are making wrong assumptions.
Okay.
As we speak now, have you ever been to a taxi rank Because I think
Yes,
you
of course.
are discussing from a point of privilege yourself.
I'm from deep cliffs of where to do it. What do you mean have I been to a taxi rank?
Have you been to a taxi rank and see who are the customers there?
Yeah, well, 70% of
what-
the population at least is black people. Obviously, you'll see more black people anywhere than you would see other people. It's normal. But you can't work the minorities out. No, but you can't have a system that works out the minorities out of the economy of South Africa forever. You can't do that. I mean,
why do you accept it when it's at the taxi rank, but when it's at the economy ownership, you don't accept it?
Whatever I accept.
You've got double standards. Blacks must also be only be consumers and must be assisted. But when they're supposed to own the economy, no, they can't because the economy cannot reflect the demographic. But at the taxi rank, it can.
I'm not saying
no, it can't work like that. So a white boy who was born even 10 years ago, they're still benefiting from white privileges,
irrespective of the kind of family they come from.
It doesn't matter because merely by being white, they've been benefiting from white privilege. And then just go and check the people who are doing a white child graduates from university today, they go straight to work. A black child who graduates today, they have to be taken to this.
No, they don't go straight to work. They leave the country because they can't get employed in South Africa. Many of them leave the country.
No. That's not true. That's not true. You must read the Employment Equity Act. I think
you must look at the figures of the people who are leaving.
Don't base your argument on newspaper articles and Twitter.
Okay.
Go and read Employment Equity Report. It will show you who gets employed, who gets promoted. It's white people. It's not black people. So we must be factual. We can't be basing our things on newspaper headlines. Those are sensationalist things that are intended to keep black people begging and poor.
Can you keep your Adidas? Can you shut up your Adidas behind there, please? Whoever is. I see Adidas making noise in the background. Look, guys, I just want to just a quick word. The people, the viewers out there with all their very, very awesome contributions on the side. I just want you to know that we're noticing those. Some people were asking about Andy in Twitter. He was supposed to be here. We have no idea. He didn't tell us he was not coming. People are saying that the Nationalist Party was nationalist, and do we need to repeat the mistakes? Somebody's saying the taxi rank is part of the economy. As blacks, we have to travel for hours to attend quality schools, and the majority of us are raised by single mothers. I'm a young white person that just left, and all my friends have. It's not a newspaper article. And somebody else said, look, I had to shut down my business because of the red tape, government red tape. So a number of my employees, he didn't say how many people had lost their jobs because he had to shut down his company and leave the country. Mr. Dumo, Denga, what are you saying to that?
Yes. Okay. Just to answer Tepo's question with regards to should we have deliberate action? If you want to, but the state must not be involved in that. The state must be like, hey, man, if you want to have deliberate action in redressing the past as a company, go ahead. So I think that if you own a company and you feel that women have been unjustly treated, or black people or whoever, and you say you're going to make a deliberate action to have a female CEO in that company, or a female manager, or female owners. I'm talking. I didn't interrupt you, sir. Kganki, I didn't interrupt you. No, but Kganki,
let him finish. Kganki, let him finish. I will promise you after
finish,
Kganki. Let him finish.
No, Kganki, hold on, please. Let me finish. Please.
I just want to get the charger.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay, cool. Sorry. Okay. So the point I'm making is that from that perspective, where was I? Yes, if you want to do it, go ahead. As a private owner of a company, go ahead. If you think that's the right way to do it, go ahead. Because at least then you take the risk that's associated with it. The government, when they say you need to hire this and own this, and they determine the ownership structure, they have no skin in the game. So it's not fair for them to do that. I think it should be voluntary. As I said before, if you have a company you want to do that, no problem. Now, so that's to answer Tepo's question. And then to respond to Kganki as well, I think that we're talking about the minimum wage pricing black people out of the economy. I referenced an American author, right? But guess what? There was another American author, and he was black. He passed away. His name is Walter Williams. And he did an investigation in South Africa at the end of apartheid. And what he saw was that the racist white unions, they used the minimum wage to price black people out of the market. So what they did was they knew that black people were willing to work for less, right? And companies were hiring black people up to the point that even the NP government were fining these companies because they said you had too many black people. But there was an incentive to hire black people because they were cheaper at that time. So what the minimum wage, so they wanted to implement a minimum wage high enough so that if the business owner had to make a decision, he would choose a white person over a black person. Because if he chooses a black person and if he chooses a black person and goes over the quota, right, then he's going to get fined. So rather, they made the opportunity cost of hiring a black person very high, which was a problem. So the minimum wage did do that to black South Africans in South Africa. And then I think also, guys, we must understand something. I think the problem is that people are talking about BEE from intentions. You know, we want to make the economy reflect this and reflect that and reflect that. Look, I can want to run. I can say I want to run as fast as Usain Bolt and do everything that makes me run slower, and then say no, I must do those things in order for me to run as fast as Usain Bolt, or make it harder, or do it at a high intensity. It doesn't work like that. There are ways that there are things that you need to do in order to, get to that point. So if you want to be fit, you got to eat the right stuff. You got to go to gym and stuff like that. That's a universal law. And the same thing works with economics. If you want in a black majority country for black people to take advantage of economic opportunities, then therefore you need to make it easier for them to do so. That's the first thing. And then there's another thing that Tsepo said, which I think is a very important point as well, is that not everybody starts off in the same place. That is correct. Not everyone's going to start off in the same place. None of us here started off in the same place, right? But do you think now it is fair to go and say that, okay, or for the government rather, never mind a company, for a government to actually come in and say that, well, because you started off before this guy, or because you're stronger and quicker, that means when you do 100 meters, you must run with weights on you, while the overweight person, not so much. And that's not fair. We can't do that. So I think what we have to do is just understand that not everybody is the same. Yes, we would like to have more black people getting hired. Even me. But I just don't think BEE is the right way to do it. There's a far more efficient way. And I'm telling you now, if the ANC allowed the market to work its job and just gave lip service to BEE, I'm telling you now, more black people will be employed today than what we see now. They can just do nothing and let the market run and deregulate the economy. More black people will be hired. You will see more black businesses. And then the leader of the ANC can say, yeah, BEE is working. Meanwhile, they didn't do anything. And really, I don't understand why people don't see that. It's so easy to not do anything and then reap the benefits from it. I mean, that's what I would do. But unfortunately, the ANC's ideology, or the ideology of individuals who want black people to, or who want, let's say, more stronger black presence in the economy, their means of getting to that point is intuitive. It seems to make sense. Like, yes, if you want more black people in, you need to legislate it. But it doesn't work like that. Like the reason why the apartheid government was able to get white people into where they wanted was because they kept black people out. That's all you have to do. So now if you want to do the same thing, you have to keep other races out. And then what's going to happen? You're going to get that whole cycle of revenge coming again, where people are just going to be like, well, I had an injustice, you had an injustice, all had an injustice. Then it's going to be so confusing, and then we're not going to get anywhere. So I just think, guys, trust the market. Trust me. If you trust the market, you're going to get the results that you want, Kganki. I'm telling you, you'll get the results that you're looking for. Because me, I also want the same thing, but I just don't believe in BEE to getting to that point. Sorry, that's what I'm saying. Thank you.
I love Dumo's insights. But what I do find fascinating about goodwill and trust, we want to trust that the people in our country are honest. We want to trust that no one will commit crime. But without an instrument to say this is right and this is wrong, and that these are the consequences for the wrong, and maybe incentive for the right. Without that debate, you begin to have serious problems, and that's why we ask questions about the relevance of having a framework, a legislative framework or policy instrument to drive these conversations. Because if you go and look at the top 40 JSE listed companies, unless you put measures in place to have these discussions about women empowerment, about transformation, you are going to see, and here I'm going to refer to myself as Tsepo van der Merwe, and the Tsepo van der Merwe and Piet van der Merwe and Johan van der Merwe will continue to run things, and not necessarily all the time in the right direction, as we've seen with Steinhoff. But anyway, maybe there's another technical question to pose around BEE. This discussion about preferential procurement in government and where it has led us to today. Maybe one of yourselves can take that question just around the impact of preferential procurement.
Can I just add to that question? It's a good question, but also the fact that BEE over time has created some kind of black pyramid. The guys who are linked to political power have benefited from the kind of stuff that Tsepo is talking about. So it's BEE. Look at who's going to own SAA, who's going to own a disbundled ESCOM. It's not you and me, the ordinary guy. Okay, maybe Kganki, people just love your chair. Maybe you might own some of this stuff. I can't, because I don't have the kind of chair that he's sitting on. So to the point, what has preferential procurement and the appointment of specific people down to where we're at? I mean, we're having this discussion today because this thing is not working. Why do we keep running the same thing over and over again when it's failed in so many instances?
Yeah, I think maybe let's not confuse or conflate issues. The minimum wages have got nothing to do with the BEE. There's no in BEE legislation and BEE code of good practice. There's no minimum wage there. So that's a separate discussion. That talks maybe to the labor market, and we may agree there, because I also think that there's red tape, but we shouldn't bring that thing to a BEE discussion, because if you read the Black Economic Empowerment Act, there are specific interventions there. It's ownership, it's management, skills transfer, procurement, and enterprise development. So the discussion should ideally only focus on those things and leave other things. The fact that if you want to register a company, you can't register it in Alexander, that is a different discussion. But you can register it in Santin, that's a different discussion. It may be about race, but it's not about Black economic empowerment. But let's look at the BEE, because BEE is not reverse racism at all. As we speak now, ownership that white companies are failing to achieve is a mere 26% of a company. So you are saying 80% of the population must at least own 26%. Who owns the rest?
But who founded the companies that must have black CEOs? I mean, I'm still trying. If I'm a white dude, I start a company, you think go and find a black manager for a CEO for your company? I mean, come on.
But blacks, remember, blacks were not allowed to find companies.
No, they are now, since 1994, maybe, even before.
Those whites, if blacks were there, they wouldn't be where they are, including rugby players and cricket players. Most of them are incompetent, like what we see now with the ESCOM CEO. They wouldn't have been there if blacks were allowed to do those things. So hence we're talking about white privilege. They are getting these positions because they are white, not for any other reason. They're incompetent, most of them. So because they were competing alone, the 10% was competing alone, excluding the 80%. Hence, we have to reverse that by way of legislation. But as things that the bill requirements are very, very lenient. So you are saying 80% of the population must only own 26%, but you are still failing to get to that 26%.
No, we're not saying that.
And
You're
you
saying
come
that.
and you come and ask about the sunset clause. That's not going to happen. The sunset clause will only be when the 80% own 80% of the economy. So the 26% ownership is just a minimum. It's not a maximum. So people are thinking it's a maximum they can relax. It's not going to relax. It's going to get worse because we must get to a situation where all of us we've got equal opportunities. Essence that we don't have.
Yeah, can I just say? So look, most people who are doing badly in South Africa for historic reasons are black people, right? Most people at the bottom of the pyramid are black people. The unemployed figures constitute hugely black people, and they drive to impose minimal wages are not to protect. It's not to protect white people, but black people who are at the bottom of the pyramid. But the thing is, it's an effort at improving the lives of black people. Maybe it comes from a good place, but the end result of it is that many companies cannot afford it. So they end up preferring to hire Zimbabwe instead of South African. It's still a discussion that we can have within this forum.
Yeah. But I think let's leave that one and go to the preferential procurement.
Okay.
So when preferential procurement was started, the intentions was to use the state procurement to start black companies, to support black companies, and then again, as I said, the BEE legislation was watered down. It did not achieve those things because then it introduces the point systems where if you claim that you are 26% black owned, then you get the points, and you can compete with the 100% black owned company and beat it because there are other factors like price. If you are a big company and you're competing with a small company, you just increase the price, you just reduce your price, and then the small company can afford to reduce their prices, and you then get rid of them indirectly from the market. So the preferential procurement has not necessarily achieved what it was supposed to achieve.
No, it has failed. Please call it that it has failed.
Yes, hence we've been calling for it to be repealed, and we're busy at NEDLEC now discussing what is called the public procurement bill to replace the preferential procurement legislation because it has failed. I agree with you there. Hence, we want to bring another legislation that will include what is called set aside.
But just a minute. I think
set aside for women.
Yeah.
Set aside for people living with disabilities and set aside for youth.
Right.
So that a certain percentage of state procurement will be set aside for those groups so that we can bring them into the mainstream economy.
But procurement has failed. I think we're not saying the same. I'm not saying it's failed black people. I'm saying it's failed South Africa. It's failed the South African economy.
I can't talk about the other people who have been benefiting and are still benefiting. I'm talking about black people who are still marginalized as we speak.
Okay. Matseba, Mr. Denga, any point?
Oh, yeah, okay. I got something.
Can give it a step around preferential procurement. Maybe share your views.
All right. Yeah, with regards to preferential procurement, again, as I said, the state shouldn't get involved in this stuff because they're going to just create more of a mess. But I think the problem with preferential procurement is that it creates the wrong incentives. Guys, when we look at these things, you must understand the state's position in all of this. The state, according to Hans Herman Hoppe, libertarian author, Austro-libertarian, right? He stated that the state is an organization that has two characteristics. Firstly, it has a ultimate monopoly on decision making within a particular region, and the second part is that they have a monopoly on taxation. So now think about it this way. Now, if I am the arbiter, let's say if you look at all four of us here, right? So if I am the arbiter of all conflicts that occur among ourselves, including the conflicts that I'm involved in, would you guys willingly enter into that deal and say, Dumo is the arbiter of all conflicts that we have, including the ones that he's involved in among ourselves. Would you guys get involved in that? You wouldn't, because you know that the power that I have, I'm going to turn everything in my favor. So that's what the state does. I think what they're doing is they're using the preferential procurement as a means to benefit themselves. And it's a fact. We saw it, guys. SAA, BNP Capital. We saw that whole thing that happened. I mean, that company, the SAA was going to pay what, 250 million to that company, but the other banks were going to offer the same service for like 10% of the price. The problem, and I mentioned earlier that during the State Capture Commission, in the reports, it stated that the problem with the reason why we saw so much of the state capture occur was because of BEE. There was ambiguity in the law. It allowed the people within power to channel funds to whoever they wanted. And then when people question it, they say, no, it's a black business. It's a black business. When you're like, come on, it's not about being black. It's about being a cader. That's the reality. So that's the thing about it, is that people must understand the state's power. I think the idea of preferential procurement to help start black businesses, and I'm saying quote unquote black businesses because that's not really the intention. It was there to actually assist people who are closely connected to the ruling class. And that's exactly what we saw. So I think, in my opinion, preferential procurement must be thrown out the window. I think what they should do is that, in my opinion, they should, reduce VAT on top of that. And, the people that are paying tax, give them their tax money back, reduce the tax rate or something of that nature. Because that way, I mean, there's no point in us paying tax just so that the government can fund people who are closely connected to them.
Yeah, and the
that
thing
doesn't
is,
seem
a lot of the value chains are filled with people who don't add any value to the product. So they solely get the let me give you a specific anecdote. So a gentleman, I think a major general in the South African National Defence Force, wrote an article about 2 years ago, I think it was 2020 to 2019. I referenced it in an article I wrote. Anyway, he said, look, my team protects the South African border, in the northern border, what he said, along Botswana, Zimbabwe, towards Mozambique. We protect it all. And most of our money, our budget, goes into replacing tires for our SUVs that control that part of the border. And the problem is that when I look into the market for a tire, the kind of tire that I'm looking for, I could pay 2,005 or 3,000 rands for it. But I'm forced to use the procurement system, and the procurement system pushes me to people who are selling the same tire I could get straight in from the market for 2,000, 3,000 rands. I'm having to pay 7,000, 7,500 rands for it from people who are adding no value. They're just getting it from somebody adding a percentage for themselves and selling. So in the end, I'm not able to make the end of the year with the budget because of the system. Surely there's something wrong with that kind of system, and it's throughout. I mean, we've seen people paying for buckets for 250 or 5,000 rands, crazy things, pens for stuff, because of this procurement system. It has to go.
Exactly.
It's killing the market.
Now, sorry, just one more point. Sorry, Tsepo, sorry, just one more point. Exactly that. So because, as I said, because the state has that type of power, are they going to be looking for efficient ways of spending money? Of course not. They're not, because they're going to just get their tax money or they're going to take out debt. That's all they're going to do. But if someone who had limited resources had to choose, they would look into the market and look for the cheapest price. The only time you wouldn't do that is when really you're trying to benefit your friend, and the state is the one that's benefiting people that are close to them, because now they're going to choose a procurement partner who has the right, BEE score, and charges like 200% more than the person that was denied the opportunity. And then we say, oh yeah, let's just do it because it's a black-owned company. Clearly, guys, if you had limited resources and you had to choose, you'll be like, you'll go to the black guy and say, listen, man, I know it's tough, but everything, but this other guy, he's selling the same tire for 100% less. Sorry, man, but my wallet is not racist. It's moneyist. I don't know. We want to spend the lowest amount of money, and that's the reality. So that's what we need to understand. The market works on incentives. Once you get the right incentives in place, I am telling you, the right results are going to come. And again, I'm not against black people being empowered. I'm just against the means as it's described within the legislation. That's what I'll say.
There might be another opportunity to talk about practically as we run up towards the end. Practically, given what we now know has gone wrong, what are the instruments that we can do, like practical steps to? We know that preferential procurement has not worked; it has failed. We know also now that there are problems with BEE. What are the next steps, especially given that we have two contrasting views, in the sense that on the one view, which I often believe in, is that you need to use policy to drive a change and govern, and that our country is crafted in such a way that we operate within a democratic dispensation with a constitution, and people have the right to go and vote on, in 2024 or so. But what are the other practical instruments that we can take now to deal with perhaps even the theft that happens with BEE being used as an instrument to perpetuate that theft?
Yeah, Kganki, before I respond to that, because I think it's just in line with many of the comments that we're seeing there on the side. Look, a lot of people would like to see more investment going into creating an environment that enables people, Black people, to create own stuff and thrive. Perhaps we need to move away from expropriatory Black economic development, Kganki. Okay, it's supposed to become the minister responsible for this sort of thing going forward. Surely you can't keep trying the same thing over and over again and expect different outcomes. To Tsepo's point, what new things would you bring to the table? What changes would you make to the current legislation in order to make it work for South Africa?
I think in every system there's going to be abuse, but you can't then say the abuse is a system.
Well, the country has failed.
Yeah. When people abuse BEE to their own end, it doesn't mean that's BEE. That's abuse, and that must be dealt with accordingly. Those people must be taken to task. And for example, if people give business to the Guptas in the name of the BEE, that's not BEE. That is abuse. Those people must be dealt with accordingly, because they are abusing the system, a good system that is there. It's any system is got its own faults. BEE is not perfect like any other system, but abuse happens. If people get their friends and close relatives and connected people, that is not BEE. That is abuse, and that has to be dealt with accordingly. For us, I think also we need to separate between public procurement and preferential procurement, because public procurement talks about the state procurement. That is the procurement that states does on a daily basis. That can be used easily if the state has got the political will. Can be used easily to encourage and create more Black owners. But also remember that we were operating this BEE in a capitalist environment. So we're not going to have 2 million millionaires or 2 million billionaires. That doesn't work that way. Just like we've got the few Oppenheimers and the Ruperts and others, we're going to have a few Black people who become billionaires. It's because it's the context of the system we are working
linked to political power.
Yeah, I think that's where the issue of abuse is. It shouldn't be like that. It should be any other Black person who's capable, who can become a billionaire. They don't have to necessarily be linked to political power. But that as I said, is a different discussion that we can have at some stage regarding abuse. But for me, if I was the minister, I was going to tighten the rules, make sure that we accelerate the implementation of broad-based Black economic empowerment. We increase the 26% and make it 51%, so that we can have many Black people owning and running the country. Blacks are not here begging because they are being done favors. There's no expropriation of any way, because Black people go and borrow money from a financial institution and pay for the stake in a company that is in their own country where they are the majority. So we can't be begging to participate in the economy where we are the majority. So we have to accelerate it and make sure that things work much faster. We have more women in executive and non-executive position. We've got more women owning the companies, and people living with disabilities. We have more young people owning the economy, so that we can move towards what you said, the sunset clause.
I thought you said no sunset. There's no discussion about sunset clauses.
Yeah, I'm explaining the sunset clause I'm talking about is different from the one you're talking about. The one I'm talking about is where the majority of the people, as per the demographics, they own, they run, they manage the economy.
But I'm surprised that you're not saying they start their own businesses and run them successfully. I mean, they must always go and get a stake in businesses started by the minority that's one day going to become that's going to go from 10% to 2% to 7%, 6%, 5%. We can't constantly be waiting for white people to start things to take a bit of them. We need to start, we need to create a knowledge economy where people come up with awesome ideas, because Black people as human beings can do that. They have it in themselves, just like any other human being, to start new things. But we're treating them like babies. We want them to rely on government grants, on the state taking care of them so that they can keep voting for the same criminal cabal into power. We need to give autonomy to Black people, to give them the power to do their own stuff, not to forever believe that they need to take from somebody else in order to be strengthened.
Yeah, I'm not saying they must not start their own businesses. I was concentrating on the business that are already there. Black people are starting business every day. They're starting there. But as I said, I gave you an example with the telcos. Right. We've got 2 telcos that own 90% of the market. So even if you go and start a telco, it's not going to move anywhere. So hence, we've been working very closely with the Competition Commission to reduce the market concentration. So while we're dealing with the implementation of the BE on the one side, we're also dealing with the market concentration so that there can be space created for Black people to play a role in the economy. You have to do both. You can't focus on one and leave the other. But we don't have a parallel economy in the country. Even if you go and start your own telco company, it's not going to succeed because the market itself won't allow it to succeed. Hence, you have to deal with the market itself and then reduce the market concentration from the big players.
So do you okay? So can we have about 5 minutes to wrap up? Okay. Maybe I'm going to wrap up. Let me allow Mr. Denga, if your parting words, Seppo, and then Kganki, you'll be the final one with the last word for the closing.
So it's interesting. He says that we want to reduce market concentration with the telcos, right? It's funny they haven't done that, right? Why did they do it with Eskom? The state owns Eskom. They wanted this experiment there. But now they want to do it with the telcos. That doesn't make sense, right? But if I was the minister, right, what I would do just to if we really want to make the market much more better, is that I would go to the president and say, listen, this BEE thing, it's not working. We all know it's there just to benefit fellow ANC members, and the country is getting pissed off, right? So I'll act like Deng Xiaoping. I would say, listen, if you want, you guys can keep your whatever, but we need to open up the market. We cannot sit and just think that adding more legislation is going to change things. It's not. Well, change things for the better. It's not. Open it up. Allow people to take advantage of the market. Allow people to take advantage of the profits and the losses and everything like that. And then you would see generally the living standards and everything will go up. I just think the legislative approach is a bit lazy. I think a lot of the people that make legislation are unaware of the realities. I mean, I'm telling you, one day they're probably going to say that we need to legislate against gravity because every time I jump, I fall down. So it's illegal to fall down when you jump. You know, the fact is, you can't do that. There's reality. The market works on incentives. It doesn't work on how you envision something, and then we're just going to make laws to make it like that. No, we must understand that. It's like scientific laws. And once you understand that, then we'll build the right environment. The same thing, if you want to grow a plant in a certain area, You need to know that there are certain conditions that the plant can thrive in, and you create those conditions. You're not going to write legislation and say, okay, this plant is not allowed to grow faster than so many centimeters per day. It's going to do that irrespective. But then if you're going to put a police guy there who cuts the plant whenever it grows faster than what it's legislated to do, then you're not going to get any progress. That's my thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So
Yeah, I think there's space here to accelerate ease of doing business so that the existing businesses that are there, the small entrepreneurs, can thrive. But importantly, there's space to accelerate access to opportunities, funding for young entrepreneurs who are Black. And that doesn't mean I'm saying we must not accelerate anybody else's opportunities. But I am for the deliberate policy instruments supported with the right skills and expertise to drive the right type of behavior, because simply ignoring things doesn't mean they're going to change. And it's good, it's positive for our country, for everybody to succeed. Kganki, hand over to you.
Yeah, I think the continuation of marginalizing Black people who are majority in South Africa is the biggest threat to democracy. When you have people who don't feel like they own anything in their own country, one day they'll wake up like they did last year in July. One day they will wake up and render this country ungovernable. So the little that you are trying to protect may just disappear. So it's important that we know the reason why we're advocating for inclusivity is to make sure that the democratic project is sustained. But the more you're trying to hide ownership of the economy from Black people and trying to exclude them, they're going to get hurtful one day, and you're going to lose everything that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Denga, Mr. Matabane, my co-host, Matsepa Matseba. Look, this is a conversation that we're going to have, we must keep having until we hopefully wake up and move away from Soviet-era archaic policies. Maybe the kind of changes that need to happen in South Africa cannot happen under the kind of political leadership that we've had for the past 28 years. Maybe not, okay? I think that when you're stuck with people who think they must keep pushing the same nail into the same hole until the two parts hold, and even though the hole is becoming bigger and bigger out of abuse, it's not going to work. At some point, you need to stop and say, maybe we need to try something else, maybe a different set of people to run South Africa, because whether you like it or not, the economy is hurting. It's hurting not because of COVID only, not because it's hurting of mismanagement. We had been downgraded. Our sovereign credit rating was downgraded even before, as we got into the COVID era, because of the kind of policies that we have. The governing party in South Africa is divided. So the one side doesn't agree with the other side on what kind of policies to introduce for South Africa. And while the governing party, which still holds the electoral mandate until 2024, is not able to agree on some clear things for South Africa, how do you expect South Africa to be credible? How do you expect it to start sending unambiguous messages to the rest of the world and to South Africans? And we need to build an economy that is inclusive. And inclusive doesn't mean just for Blacks. It means for everybody. It means that the person who just said here, my daughter is 16 years old, when she finishes matric, there won't be. There are many of them, whether you like it or not. Kganki, there are many people who are being chased out of the country because they feel that they don't have the right skin color. We need to change that. It needs to stop. Black people are being born every day. White people are being born every day. We can't say, at what point do we say it's enough? We need to agree on a different approach for this amazing country with so much potential. But ladies and gentlemen, you've seen for yourself, we had the views from our awesome participants in the discussion. We'll have these discussions again. This is Solimoeng, Tshepo Matseba, Mr. Kganki Matabane, and Dumo Denga at WorldView. Good evening.
Good evening.